My palms were dripping with sweat as I gripped the velvet sleeve of the man standing next to me. We were at the entrance of the most expensive restaurant in the city, and my entire life was about to explode. 5 minutes ago, I was in the parking lot, crying in my car. My boss had threatened to fire me unless I proved I was dating someone important. And I desperately needed the prize money from our design contest to pay for my mom's heart surgery. In a moment of pure panic, I saw a guy leaning against a black SUV. He had messy dark hair, a rugged jawline, and eyes that looked like they had seen everything. He looked like a driver waiting for his boss, but in that lighting, he looked like a god. I ran up to him and shoved $500, my entire rent money, into his hand. "You aren't a driver tonight," I hissed, my voice shaking. "I need you to be Dashiell Jake. He's the billionaire who owns half the city. If you mess up, I lose my job and my mother dies. Do we have a deal?" The stranger looked down at the crumpled bills in his hand. Then he looked at me. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face, and his eyes suddenly turned cold and sharp, like a wolf. "For $500? He asked, his voice a deep, smooth rumble. "I'll be whoever you want me to be, Miss Alden." I froze. I hadn't told him my name. But before I could ask how he knew it, my boss, Alaric Ray, marched toward us with a fake smile. "Briar," Alaric called out. "Is this the famous Mr. Jake you've been bragging about?" My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I squeezed the stranger's arm, silently begging him to play along. To my shock, he didn't trip over his words. He stood taller, his whole energy changing from a simple driver to a man who owned the world. He wrapped a heavy, warm arm around my waist and pulled me close. "The one and only," the stranger said, looking down at me with a look so intense it felt real. "And I don't appreciate people keeping my girl at the office so late, Alaric." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The lie was working. I had successfully hired a fake boyfriend to save my life. What I didn't know, and what would soon turn my world upside down, was that I hadn't hired a struggling driver. I had just paid the real Dashiell Jake to pretend to be himself. The gold-plated doors of the restaurant swung open, and the blast of air conditioning felt like a slap to my burning face. I felt like a tightrope walker over a pit of hungry lions. On one side, I had my boss, Alaric Ray, a man who smelled of expensive cigars and smelled blood in the water. On the other side, I had the driver I just bribed with $500. I squeezed the stranger's arm so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart was thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thump, 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 sounding exactly like the hospital monitor next to my mother's bed. I couldn't fail. I had spent the last 3 years at Ray Group, working until my eyes bled, all for the chance to win the Luminous Heart Design Contest. The prize money was $50,000. That was the exact cost of the surgery Mom needed to stay alive. "So Dashiell," Alaric said, his eyes narrowing as he scanned my hired boyfriend from head to toe. Alaric was a predator. He could sniff out a lie from a mile away. "I've heard so much about you, though I must say, I expected you to arrive with a bit more fanfare. No security detail tonight?" I felt the stranger's muscles tingle under my touch. My breath hitched. I hadn't coached him on the security detail. The real Dashiell Jake was a ghost, a reclusive billionaire who never appeared in photos and lived behind a wall of bodyguards. If this guy looked too normal, Alaric would realize he was just a random man from the parking lot. "Security is for men who are afraid," the stranger said. His voice was like velvet draped over gravel, smooth but with a dangerous edge. He didn't even look at Alaric. Instead, he looked down at me, tucking a loose strand of my hair behind my ear. His fingers were warm, and for a second, I forgot it was an act. "I told Briar I wanted tonight to be private. Just us. Isn't that right, darling?" I forced a laugh that sounded a bit too high-pitched. "That's right. He's very private. That's why you never see him in the news, Alaric." We moved toward a table at the center of the room. Every eye in the restaurant followed us. This place was the hub of the jewelry industry, filled with people like Tamsin, my rival designer who was currently sitting 3 tables away. I saw her jaw drop as she spotted me with the ruggedly handsome man on my arm. She had spent the last month telling everyone I was a lonely loser who lived in a cubicle. Seeing her face turn that specific shade of sour grape purple was almost worth the $500 alone. Sit, Dashiell, or whatever his name was, said, pulling out my chair with the grace of a prince. As he sat down beside me, our knees brushed under the table. A jolt of electricity shot up my leg. I looked at him out of the corner of my eye. Close up, he was even more intimidating. He wore a simple dark jacket, but the way he carried himself made the jacket look like it cost more than my car. He had this calm, bored expression that screamed old money. So, Alaric started, leaning in. He was trying to trap us. Jake Group is looking to acquire a few smaller firms this year. Isn't that the rumor? Tell me, Dashiell, what do you think of Ray Group's current portfolio? Briar tells me she's the star of our design team. My blood ran cold. This was the test. If this guy didn't know anything about jewelry or business, we were dead. I reached under the table and tapped a frantic code on his thigh, trying to signal him to stay vague. But the stranger didn't stay vague. He leaned back, crossing his arms. Ray Group has potential, he said coolly. But honestly, Alaric, your current collections are stale. They're repetitive, except for Briar's work. Her Midnight Lotus series is the only reason your stock hasn't plummeted 10 points this quarter. Alaric blinked. I blinked. I hadn't told the stranger the name of my series. I hadn't even mentioned my work. How did he know that? You've seen her work? Alaric asked, his voice dropping an octave. I've seen everything she's ever made, the stranger said, his eyes locking onto mine. There was a weird intensity in his gaze, something that felt like a secret between us. She's the most talented designer in this city. If you don't realize that, maybe she should come work for me instead. Alaric's face paled. He couldn't lose his star to a billionaire rival, even if he treated me like trash. Now, let's not be hasty. Briar is a valued member of the family. Family? The stranger let out a short, dark laugh. Is that why you threatened to fire her this morning, because her personal life wasn't vibrant enough for the company image? The table went silent. The clinking of silverware in the restaurant seemed to stop. I felt like I was shrinking into my seat. I hadn't told him about the threat. I had only told him I needed to save my job. Alaric looked like he'd swallowed a fly. I was merely encouraging her to find a balance. A designer needs inspiration. I grabbed my water glass, my hands shaking so hard the ice rattled. Who was this man? He was playing the part too well. He was scaring my boss, he was making me look like a queen, and he was doing it all with a terrifying level of detail. Suddenly, Tamsin appeared at our table. She was wearing a dress that was too tight and a smile that was too sharp. Her boyfriend, Garrick, was trailing behind her like a lost puppy. Briar? Tamsin chirped, her eyes boring into the stranger. I just had to come over and meet the man of mystery. I'm Tamsin, the lead designer at Ray Group. And you are? Dashiell Jake, the stranger said. He didn't stand up. He didn't even offer his hand. He just looked at her like she was a smudge on a window. Tamsin's smile flickered. Right. It's so funny, I was just reading an article that said Mr. Jake was in Geneva today for a watch convention. I felt a cold sweat break out across my neck. My heart stopped. I looked at the stranger, waiting for him to crumble. This was it. The lie was over, but he didn't even flinch. He picked up his wine glass and took a slow sip. The press is always 12 hours behind me, Tamsin. I find it's easier to move through the world when people think I'm where I'm not. Don't you agree? He said it with such casual authority that Tamsin actually stepped back. She looked at Alaric, then back at the stranger. Well, she stammered, I suppose, but you don't look like your photos. There are no public photos of me. He replied flatly. If you saw one, it was a fake. Much like that diamond necklace you're wearing. The clarity is terrible. You really should have Briar look at it. She actually knows what a real stone looks like. Tamsin gasped, her hand flying to her neck. Garrick looked embarrassed. Alaric looked impressed. And I wanted to jump up and cheer. For years, Tamsin had bullied me, stolen my ideas, and made fun of my clothes. Seeing her get dismantled by a man I'd met in a parking lot was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. The rest of the dinner was a blur of high-stakes tension. The stranger handled every question with ease. He talked about market shifts, gemstone origins, and corporate strategy, as if he'd been born in a boardroom. I just sat there, nodding and trying to act like a woman who was used to having a billionaire's arm around her. As the check arrived, which Dashiell insisted on paying despite my $500 being in his pocket, Alaric leaned over one last time. Briar, I must apologize. I had no idea you were in such high demand. Your position at Ray Group is more than secure. In fact, let's talk about a promotion after the contest. I smiled, though it felt brittle. Thanks, Alaric. Finally, we were out. We walked back into the cool night air, away from the prying eyes of the restaurant. As soon as we reached the shadows of the parking lot, I let go of his arm and leaned against a pillar, gasping for air. Oh my God, I whispered. I can't believe we survived that. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Listen, you were incredible. Way better than an actor. Where did you learn all that stuff about jewelry, and how did you know my name and the name of my collection? The stranger turned to me. The charming boyfriend mask was gone. He looked cold again, and very, very powerful. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the $500 I'd given him. He didn't give it back. He slowly tore the bills in half, one by one, letting the pieces flutter to the ground like confetti. What are you doing? I cried out, reaching for the falling money. That was my rent. I don't need your money, Miss Alden, he said. He stepped closer, pinning me between his body and the concrete pillar. He smelled of sandalwood and power. I just wanted to see how far you would go to save your skin. Who are you? I breathed, my heart racing for an entirely different reason now. I think you already know, he whispered, leaning down until his lips were inches from my ear. But you'll find out for sure tomorrow morning. You're summoned to the Jake Group headquarters at 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. I hate it when my employees, or my girlfriends, keep me waiting. He stepped back, climbed into the back of the black SUV I'd seen him leaning against earlier, and the driver, the real driver, sped away. I stood in the dark parking lot, staring at the torn money on the ground. My head was spinning. The man I had hired, the man I had lied to, the man I had paid to pretend to be Dashiell Jake, was actually Dashiell Jake. And I had just told him he was the man who would burn the world down for me. I sank to my knees, picking up a torn half of $100 bill. I was in so much trouble. I hadn't saved my job. I had just handed my entire life over to a man who probably wanted to destroy me for using his name. But as I looked at the spot where his car had been, I remembered the way he had defended me against Tamsin. I remembered the heat of his hand on my waist. Tomorrow was going to be a disaster. Or it was going to be the start of something that would change everything. Either way, I had to be ready. I stood up, wiped my eyes, and started walking toward the bus stop. I had a meeting with a billionaire in the morning, and I needed to figure out exactly how to explain why I thought he was for hire. I didn't sleep a single wink. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those cold, silver eyes staring back at me, mocking me. I spent the entire night pacing my tiny apartment, tripping over half-finished jewelry sketches and empty coffee mugs. I kept replaying the moment I shoved that money into his hand. I had literally tried to bribe the most powerful man in the country with $500. He probably spent more than that on his socks. By 7 a.m. I was standing in front of my mirror, trying to look like a professional designer and not a woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I wore my best charcoal suit and pinned my hair back so tight it pulled at my temples. I had to look composed. I had to look like the star he had claimed I was at dinner. The Jake Group headquarters was a literal glass mountain in the center of the financial district. It was so tall, the top was lost in the morning mist. As I walked through the revolving doors, the lobby felt like a cathedral of capitalism. Marble floors, silent security guards with earpieces, and a giant logo on the wall that simply read, Jake. My legs felt like lead as I approached the reception desk. I'm Briar Alden. I have an 8 o'clock meeting with Mr. Jake. The receptionist didn't even look at a calendar. She just pressed a button. Floor 99. The private elevator is behind you, Miss Alden. The ride up was so fast my ears popped. When the doors opened, I stepped out onto a plush carpet that swallowed the sound of my heels. The entire floor was silent, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and ozone. A man in a sharp navy suit was waiting for me. Miss Alden, I'm Callum, Mr. Jake's executive assistant, he said with a polite robotic smile. He's expecting you. This way. Callum led me toward a set of massive oak doors. My heart was thumping so loud I was sure he could hear it. I wanted to turn and run. I wanted to vanish into the city and never come back. But then I thought of my mom. I thought of Dr. Rowan's voice on the phone yesterday telling me that the surgery couldn't wait another month. If I lost my career today, I lost her. Callum opened the doors and I stepped into an office that was larger than my entire apartment building. One wall was nothing but glass, looking out over the clouds. And there, standing by the window with his back to me, was the man from the parking lot. He wasn't wearing the simple jacket anymore. He was in a bespoke three-piece suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He looked like an apex predator surveying his kingdom. "You're 3 minutes early," Dashiell said without turning around. "I like punctuality. It's a rare trait in people who live double lives." I swallowed hard, my throat feeling like it was full of sand. "Mr. Jake, about last night." He turned around slowly. The morning light caught the sharp angles of his face, making him look even more intimidating than he had in the restaurant. He walked toward his massive mahogany desk and sat down, gesturing for me to take the chair opposite him. "Last night was an interesting experience," he said, leaning back and lacing his fingers together. "I've been offered many things in my life, Briar. Mergers, mansions, even countries. But no one has ever offered me $500 to be their rental boyfriend." I felt my face heat up until I was sure I was glowing red. "I didn't know it was you. You were leaning against a car and you looked like a driver." I was desperate. My boss was going to fire me and I have important things at stake. "I know exactly what is at stake," Dashiell interrupted. He pulled a file from his desk and flipped it open. "Maris Alden, age 54, advanced cardiomyopathy. Surgery cost $50,000. You've been working overtime for 3 years to cover the bills, but the interest on your medical debt is growing faster than your salary." I gasped, leaning forward. "How do you know that? Have you been spying on me?" "I'm looking to buy Ray Group," he said calmly, as if he were talking about the weather. "When I buy a company, I research its assets. You, Briar, are the only asset that company has worth keeping. But I didn't expect to meet my top designer in a parking lot with a handful of crumpled cash." He reached into his drawer and pulled out the 2 halves of the $100 bill I'd tried to give him. He laid them on the desk like a puzzle. "You lied to your boss. You lied to the industry, and you used my name to do it," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Do you have any idea what my legal team could do to you for that?" I felt a tear prick at my eye, but I brushed it away angrily. I wouldn't let him see me cry. "Go ahead then. Sue me. Fire me. But don't sit there and act like you're a saint. You played along. You lied too. You stood there and told Alaric you'd seen my work and that you'd burn the world down for me." Dashiell's eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite read. "I didn't lie about the work. I've had my eye on your designs for months. That's why I was in that parking lot. I was scouting your office incognito to see how the staff functioned without a CEO around. I didn't expect a frantic girl to tackle me and offer me a job." He stood up and walked around the desk, stopping right in front of my chair. He leaned down, his face so close I could see the flecks of gold in his irises. "I'm not going to sue you, Briar," he whispered. "In fact, I'm going to help you. But nothing in this world is free." I held my breath. "What do you want?" "My mother, Rosalind, is obsessed with the idea of me marrying a woman named Grace. She's a jewelry designer. Or so she claims, from a high society family. It's a business arrangement I want no part of, but the board of directors is pressuring me to settle down to stabilize the company image." He stepped back, a smirk playing on his lips. "You need a fake boyfriend to keep your job and get your mom's surgery. I need a fake girlfriend to keep the vultures off my back. So, here is the deal. We continue the lie." I blinked, confused. "What? You want to keep pretending to date me?" "Exactly," Dashiell said. "You will be my official +1 for the next 3 months. We will attend galas, dinners, and board meetings. In exchange, I will personally fund your mother's surgery today. Not as a loan, but as a signing bonus. And I will ensure you win that design contest fairly by giving you access to the Jake Group's private gemstone vault for your contest entry." My heart skipped a beat. Access to the Jake vault? That was a designer's dream. And the surgery? He would pay for it today? Why me? I asked, my voice trembling. You could hire a supermodel or an actress, someone who knows how to move in your world. Because you're a wild card, he said, walking back to the window. And because you're the only person I've met in years who had the guts to look me in the eye and tell me what to do. Besides, the best way to hide a secret is to put it in plain sight. Everyone already saw us together last night. If I suddenly show up with a model, Alaric Ray will know something is wrong. But if I stay with the talented designer I defended at dinner, it's a love story the world will swallow whole. I looked at the torn money on the desk. This was crazy. It was dangerous. I was a girl from a studio apartment, and he was the king of Wall Street. But then I pictured my mom's face. I pictured her being able to breathe again, to walk in the park again. I stood up and held out my hand. 3 months. That's it, and you stay out of my real life. Dashiell took my hand. His grip was firm and hot. Instead of shaking it, he pulled me slightly closer, his gaze dropping to my lips for a fraction of a second. Deal, he said. But be careful, Briar. In my world, the lines between fake and real have a habit of disappearing. Just then, the office door burst open. A tall, blonde woman in a white silk dress marched in, looking like she stepped off a runway. Behind her, Callum was trying to stop her, looking panicked. Dashiell, the woman cried out. I've been calling you all morning. We have the gala planning committee meeting at. She stopped dead when she saw me. Her eyes raked over my cheap suit and my messy hair, her expression turning into a mask of pure disgust. Who is this? She spat. Dashiell didn't let go of my hand. In fact, he pulled me against his side, his arm sliding around my waist just like it had at the restaurant. Grace, I believe you've heard of Briar Alden, Dashiell said coolly. The woman I've been seeing. Briar, this is Grace, my family friend. Grace's face contorted with rage. This is a joke, right? This is the little girl from the Ray group? Dashiell, you can't be serious. I'm very serious, Dashiell said. He looked down at me and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. In fact, Briar was just telling me she'd love to see your latest sketches. Since you're both designers, I'm sure you'll have so much to talk about. Grace looked like she wanted to scream. I looked at Dashiell and realized what he had done. He hadn't just hired me. He had dropped me into the middle of a war zone. The game had officially begun. And as Dashiell's hand tightened on my waist, I realized I wasn't just his girlfriend. I was his shield. The silence in the office was so thick you could have cut it with a jeweler's saw. Grace stood there, her face turning a bright, angry red that clashed horribly with her silk dress. She looked at Dashiell's hand on my waist like it was a poisonous snake. Family friend? Grace hissed, her voice trembling. Dashiell, our parents have been planning our merger for years. You can't just pick up some office girl and expect the world to believe it. Dashiell didn't even blink. He looked at her with a bored expression that made my heart race. The world will believe whatever I tell them to believe, Grace. Now, if you'll excuse us, Briar and I have a lot of catching up to do. He didn't wait for her to leave. He steered me toward a private sitting area in the corner of the office, leaving Grace standing there like a statue of fury. As soon as the heavy oak doors clicked shut behind her, I practically jumped out of his grip. Are you insane? I whispered, my voice cracking. That's Grace. She's the daughter of the Ambrose family. They basically own the gemstone trade. If she hates me, I'm not just fired. I'm erased from the industry. Dashiell sat down on a leather sofa and gestured for me to sit opposite him. She already hates you, Briar. She hates anyone with actual talent. That's why she steals it. I froze. What did you just say? Dashiell leaned forward, his eyes turning serious. Grace is a fraud. She's the rising star because her father buys her the best PR and the best ghost designers. I've suspected it for a while, but I need proof before I can break the arrangement between our families. That's where you come in. He reached into his desk and pulled out a sleek, black tablet. He slid it across the table toward me. On the screen was a digital portfolio labeled Grace Ambrose, Spring Collection. I scrolled through the images, my breath hitching in my throat. The designs were beautiful, delicate, intricate, and bold. But as I reached the 4th page, I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. This? I stammered, pointing at a sketch of a sapphire pendant shaped like a weeping willow. This is mine. Are you sure? Dashiell asked, watching me closely. I'm positive. I drew this 6 months ago. It was in my private sketchbook that I keep in my locker at Ray Group. I never even showed it to Alaric because I was saving it for the contest. My hand started to shake. I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me. Tamsin. Tamsin was friends with Grace. They went to the same high society parties. Tamsin must have stolen my sketches and sold them to Grace to get into her inner circle. Now you see why I need you, Dashiell said. And why you need me. You want your designs back? You want the credit you deserve? Help me expose her, and I'll make sure your name is the one on the front page of every fashion magazine in the world. I looked at the screen, then back at Dashiell. He was offering me everything. My mom's life, my career, and revenge against the people who had stepped on me for years. What do I have to do? I asked, my voice finally steady. Tonight is the Ambrose Charity Gala, Dashiell said. It's the biggest event of the season. Grace will be there showing off her new collection. You will attend as my date. You will wear a piece you've designed yourself, something so stunning it makes her look like an amateur. We'll let the rumors start there. He stood up and walked over to a small safe hidden in the wall. He punched in a code and pulled out a velvet box. When he opened it, the room seemed to brighten. Inside was a raw, uncut emerald the size of a pigeon's egg. It glowed with a deep, magical green. This is from my private vault, he said, handing me the box. Consider it your first tool. I want you to turn this into a masterpiece by tonight. My private workshop is downstairs. Callum will take you there. I stared at the emerald. It was worth millions. I had never touched a stone this perfect in my life. You trust me with this? I could just run away. Dashiell stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. He reached out and tilted my chin up so I had to look into his eyes. You won't run, he whispered. You're a fighter, Briar. I saw it in the parking lot, and I see it now. You want to win, and I'm the only one who can give you the trophy. For a second, the air between us felt charged with something that wasn't about business or fake dating. It felt like a spark, a dangerous one that could burn me if I wasn't careful. But then he pulled away, his face turning back into a mask of professional coldness. Go. You have 10 hours. The next 10 hours were a blur of fire and gold. Dashiell's workshop was a dream. It had every tool I had ever wanted. Lasers, high-speed polishers, and 3D printers that could create molds in minutes. I forgot about the drama, I forgot about the fake boyfriend, and I forgot about the danger. I just focused on the stone. I worked the emerald into a bird of paradise necklace. I used gold wire to create delicate feathers that seemed to move with every breath. I didn't just want it to be jewelry, I wanted it to be alive. By 7 p.m., I was standing in a dressing room at the Jake Group. A team of stylists had descended on me, doing my hair and makeup until I didn't recognize myself. They put me in a dress of midnight blue silk that hugged my curves and flared out at the floor. And around my neck, the emerald glowed like a heart of fire. You're ready, a voice said from the doorway. I turned around and saw Dashiell. He was in a black tuxedo, looking so handsome it actually hurt to look at him. He stopped in his tracks, his eyes scanning me from head to toe. For the first time, he looked genuinely surprised. Is something wrong? I asked, suddenly feeling self-conscious. Is it too much? Dashiell walked toward me, his footsteps silent on the carpet. He stopped right in front of me and reached out, his thumb brushing over the gold feathers of the necklace. It's perfect, he said softly. You look like a queen, Briar. I felt my cheeks flush. It's just the dress and the emerald. No, he said, his gaze moving to my eyes. It's you. Let's go. It's time to show them who the real talent is. The gala was held at the Ambrose estate, a mansion that looked like a castle. As we stepped out of the SUV, a wall of camera flashes blinded me. Keep your head up, Dashiell whispered, pulling me close to his side. Smile. Look like you're the luckiest woman in the world. I'm trying, I hissed through my teeth. But these shoes are killing me. We walked into the ballroom, and the chatter died down instantly. I saw Grace across the room, surrounded by a group of wealthy socialites. She was wearing a diamond set that looked expensive but boring. When she saw us, her eyes went straight to my neck. I saw her go pale. She recognized the style. She recognized the soul of the design. Dashiell? Briar. Alaric Ray appeared out of the crowd, looking like he'd won the lottery. You made it. Everyone is talking about that necklace. Briar, did you make that? It's a Jake Group exclusive, Dashiell answered for me, his hand resting possessively on my lower back. Briar is the only designer I trust with stones of this caliber. Tamsin was standing right behind Alaric, and she looked like she wanted to vomit. She stared at the emerald, her eyes full of jealousy and fear. She knew that if I was this close to Dashiell, her time of bullying me was over. It's a bit gaudy, don't you think? Tamsin sneered, trying to regain her footing. A bit too much for a charity event. Art is never too much for those who understand it, Dashiell said coolly, not even looking at her. But I wouldn't expect a copy-paster to understand the concept of a masterpiece. Tamsin flinched as if he'd slapped her. I felt a surge of triumph. But then, the music stopped. An older man with white hair and a stern face stepped onto the stage. It was Ambrose, Grace's father. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced. "Tonight, we celebrate beauty and philanthropy. And I am proud to announce that my daughter Grace has just signed a deal to become the lead designer for the new global collection. A collection that will define the next decade of luxury." The room erupted in applause. Grace stepped onto the stage, looking triumphant. She looked down at me from the podium and gave me a wicked, tiny smile. "And as a special treat," Ambrose continued, "we have the original sketches of the collection on display in the gallery tonight, including the Weeping Willow, the piece that started it all." My heart dropped. If those sketches were on display and they looked like mine, but had Grace's signature on them, it would be my word against hers. And nobody would believe a girl like me over the Ambrose family. "She's going to frame me," I whispered to Dashiell. "She's going to make it look like I stole from her." Dashiell's grip on my waist tightened. "Not if we get to those sketches first. Stay here. Act natural." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to do what I do best," Dashiell said, a dark glint in his eyes. "I'm going to change the narrative." He disappeared into the crowd, leaving me alone in the middle of a room full of people who wanted to see me fail. I saw Grace heading toward me, her father at her side. They looked like they were ready for blood. I clutched my emerald necklace, my heart hammering. The fake relationship was just the beginning. Now, I was in a real war. The air in the ballroom felt heavy, like the atmosphere before a massive thunderstorm. Dashiell had vanished into the sea of tuxedos, and I felt suddenly naked without him, despite the $1,000,000 emerald weighing down my neck. Well. A sharp voice cut through the music. I turned to find Grace standing inches away, flanked by her father, Ambrose, and a man I recognized instantly. It was Harlan, the lead gemstone scout for Ray Group. He was a man with greasy hair and a reputation for losing small diamonds that somehow ended up in his own pocket. "Miss Alden," Ambrose said, his voice like dry parchment, "I was just admiring your necklace. It's a very bold imitation of my daughter's style." My jaw tightened. "Imitation? Mr. Ambrose, with all due respect, I designed and crafted this piece myself in under 10 hours. Grace let out a melodic, fake laugh that drew the attention of nearby guests. "Oh honey, don't lie. We all know Alaric Ray doesn't have the budget for stones like that. And we certainly know a junior designer doesn't have the skill to weave gold wire like a master. Tell us, did you steal the prototype from my father's vault, or did Dashiell just buy you something and let you take the credit?" "I didn't steal anything," I said, my voice rising. I saw Tamsin and Alaric drifting closer, watching the train wreck. "If you want to talk about stealing, why don't we look at the Weeping Willow sketches in the gallery? I'd recognize my own brushstrokes anywhere." Ambrose's eyes turned cold. "Are you accusing my daughter of theft, girl? That is a very dangerous game. Harlan, you've worked with Miss Alden. What is her reputation?" Harlan stepped forward, a nasty smirk on his face. He had tried to corner me in the break room at Ray Group months ago, and I'd shoved him into a water cooler he hadn't forgotten. "Briar, she's talented, sure, but she's desperate. Her mother is sick, and we all know desperation makes people do crazy things. I caught her trying to sneak a low-grade ruby out of the lab last week. I didn't report it because I felt sorry for her." The crowd gasped. It was a total lie, but in this room, Harlan's word was gold and mine was dirt. "You liar!" I yelled. "I never touched your rubies." "Enough," Ambrose commanded. "Security, please escort this woman out, and someone call the police. I want that emerald recovered and her portfolio seized for investigation. Two large men in black suits stepped toward me. I looked around frantically, but I couldn't see Dashiell anywhere. My heart began to race. Was this his plan? To use me as a distraction while he did his business, only to let me get thrown to the wolves? The noble desperation I felt for my mother's surgery suddenly felt like a noose around my neck. "Don't touch her," a voice boomed. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Dashiell walked toward us, his face a mask of cold, calculated fury. He wasn't the charming boyfriend anymore. He was the billionaire CEO who could crush a company with a single phone call. "Mr. Jake," Ambrose said, trying to maintain his dignity. "Your friend here has been accused of professional theft and slander. I suggest you step aside. And I suggest you check your facts before you insult my future partner." Dashiell replied. He held up a small, silver flash drive. "Harlan, since you're so concerned about theft, maybe you'd like to explain the footage I just pulled from the Ray Group security servers? The footage of you handing a leather-bound sketchbook, Briar's sketchbook, to Grace Ambrose in the parking lot 3 weeks ago?" Harlan's face went from smug to ghostly white in 3 seconds. He started to stutter. That was a private matter." "It's a criminal matter," Dashiell said, turning his gaze to Grace. "And Grace, if you want to claim the Weeping Willow as yours, perhaps you can explain the hidden watermark? You see, Briar uses a specific micro-etching technique on her paper. If we put your original sketches under a UV light right now, her name will appear on every single page." Grace looked like she was about to faint. She looked at her father, but Ambrose was already backing away, trying to distance himself from the scandal. "This is a misunderstanding," Grace cried out, her voice high and panicked. "Dashiell, please." "The only misunderstanding was you thinking you could touch what belongs to me," Dashiell said. He looked at the security guards. "You're fired. Get out of my sight, and take Harlan with you." The guards hesitated, then turned and grabbed Harlan, who started screaming about his rights. The room was silent as they were dragged away. Dashiell then turned to Alaric Ray, who was sweating so much his collar was soaked. "Alaric," Dashiell said smoothly, "I believe you were about to promote Briar to head of design, and perhaps offer her a formal apology for the vibrant personal life comment?" "Yes, of course, absolutely," Alaric squealed. "Briar, you're a genius, a star." Dashiell ignored him and turned to me. The fire in his eyes softened just a fraction. He reached out and took my hand, his thumb tracing circles over my palm. "Are you okay?" he whispered. I think so," I said, my voice shaking. "How did you get the footage so fast?" "I own the security company that Ray Group uses," he said with a small, dangerous smirk. "I told you, Briar. Nothing happens in the city without me knowing." He leaned in closer, his breath warm against my ear. "But we have a problem. My mother just arrived, and she's heading this way with Grace's mother. They've already seen the scene we just caused." I looked toward the entrance and saw a woman who looked like royalty walking toward us. She had the same silver eyes as Dashiell, but they were filled with a sharp, judgmental light. The gemstone trap had been avoided, but the family trap was just closing in. The triumph I felt watching Harlan get dragged away vanished the moment Dashiell's mother, Rosalind Jake, stepped into our orbit. She didn't walk, she glided, her emerald-colored gown trailing behind her like a warning. Beside her was Grace's mother, a woman who looked like she'd spent the last 20 years sucking on lemons. "Dashiell," Rosalind said, her voice like a velvet-covered blade. "What is this scene? The help is being dragged out, and you are holding hands with a girl who looks like she's wearing the contents of my private vault." Dashiell didn't let go of my hand. He pulled me slightly closer. "Mother, this is Briar Alden. She isn't just a designer. She's the reason I've been so busy lately." Rosalind's eyes drifted to my neck. She stared at the emerald bird of paradise I'd crafted. For a second, I saw a flicker of genuine shock in her eyes, the kind of shock only a connoisseur of fine art feels when they see a masterpiece. But she quickly masked it with a sneer. "A designer?" Rosalind looked at Grace, who was trembling nearby. "Grace, dear, I thought you were the one Dashiell was interested in. Why is this person wearing a stone that belongs in a museum?" Grace saw her opening. She wiped her eyes and put on her best victim face. "Auntie Rosalind, it's a tragedy. Briar is very talented at mimicking things. She's been obsessed with Dashiell for months. She even showed up at the office yesterday to beg for a job. I think she's using his kindness to climb the social ladder. I felt my blood boil. I took a step forward, but Dashiell's hand on my waist was a silent command to stay still. Kindness? Dashiell laughed, a cold, dry sound. Mother? You know me better than that. I don't do anything out of kindness. I do things because they are valuable. Briar is the most valuable thing in this room. We shall see, Rosalind said, her eyes narrowing. If she is truly the genius you claim, she won't mind a little competition. The Ambrose Gallery is hosting a live sketching challenge tonight for the charity auction. A blind design session. If Miss Alden can produce something better than Grace under the watchful eyes of the board, I might consider her worth your time. Mother, that's enough, Dashiell warned. No, I said, stepping out from behind his shadow. I looked Rosalind straight in the eyes. I'll do it. Briar, you don't have to, Dashiell whispered, his brow furrowing. Yes, I do, I replied. I looked at Grace, who was now smiling a shark-like smile. I knew what was happening. Grace was a fraud, but she had Tamsin. Tamsin was likely hiding in the wings, ready to feed Grace ideas or designs through an earpiece or a hidden sketch. But I didn't care. I was tired of being the girl in the parking lot. The gallery was cleared, and 2 drafting tables were set up in the center of the room. A crowd gathered around us, including the top jewelry critics in the country. The prompt was simple. The heart of a secret. We had 30 minutes to create a technical sketch for a necklace. I sat down, the charcoal heavy in my hand. Across from me, Grace sat with a smug expression. I noticed her hair was styled over her ears, perfectly concealing a tiny, skin-colored earbud. I looked at the crowd and saw Tamsin standing behind a pillar, frantically sketching on a tablet. They were cheating. Again, I closed my eyes. I didn't think about the crowd or the billionaire standing behind me. I thought about my mother. I thought about the secret she had kept from me for years. The letters from my father she'd hidden under her mattress because she didn't want me to know he'd left us for another life. I thought about the weight of that secret, the way it felt like a locked box made of iron and thorns. I started to draw. My hand moved with a feverish speed. I didn't draw a heart. I drew a cage of thorns made of black gold, and inside the cage a single, glowing opal that seemed to be breaking apart. It was raw, emotional, and technically impossible for anyone but a master. Across from me, Grace was drawing a standard boring heart with a keyhole. It was technically perfect, clearly Tamsin's style, but it had no soul. 5 minutes, Ambrose announced. I saw Tamsin move. She whispered something into a microphone, and Grace's hand shifted. Grace started adding flourishes to her sketch that looked suspiciously like my Bird of Paradise style. She was trying to blend Tamsin's technical skill with my aesthetic to make it look like she was the true hybrid of talent. Suddenly, the lights in the gallery flickered and went out. The room plummeted into darkness. The crowd gasped. I felt a hand grab mine in the dark, a warm, familiar hand. Don't stop, Dashiell's voice whispered in my ear. The cameras are still running on backup power. She thinks the dark is her cover. Show them who you are in the shadows. He let go, and I felt a strange surge of confidence. I didn't need light to see the design in my head. I kept drawing, the charcoal scratching against the paper in the silence. The light slammed back on 2 minutes later. Grace was standing over her table, looking frantic. Her sketch was a mess. She had tried to add too much in the dark and had smudged the charcoal everywhere. It looked like a black blur. But my sketch? It was finished. The secret's cage stood out on the white paper like a ghost. The judges walked over. They didn't even spend 10 seconds at Grace's table. They huddled around mine, whispering in hushed, excited tones. The technique, one judge whispered. The emotional depth, it's unheard of. Rosalind Jake walked over, leaning down to inspect my work. She stayed there for a long time. When she looked up, her expression wasn't a sneer anymore. It was something closer to respect or fear. It seems, Rosalind said, her voice loud enough for the whole room to hear, that Grace has had a difficult night. Miss Alden, your design will be the centerpiece of the auction. And Dashiell, I expect to see you and your designer at Sunday brunch. I felt the air rush back into my lungs. I had won. But as the crowd began to applaud, I saw Grace leaning toward Tamsin. They weren't looking at the sketches. They were looking at my purse, which I'd left on a chair nearby. Inside that purse was the fake boyfriend contract Dashiell and I had signed this morning. Grace looked at me, a slow, venomous smile spreading across her face. She didn't care about the sketch anymore. She had found the one thing that could burn my world to the ground. She moved toward the chair, her hand reaching for my bag. I started to run, but Dashiell caught my arm, pulling me toward a journalist who wanted a photo. "Smile, Briar," he whispered, unaware of the disaster about to strike. "You're the star of the show." I smiled for the camera, but my heart was screaming. Grace had the contract. The lie was seconds away from being a headline. The camera flashes felt like lightning strikes, blinding me just long enough for Grace to disappear. I ripped my arm away from Dashiell, my heart hammering against my teeth. "Briar? What's wrong?" Dashiell asked, his brow furrowing as he noticed my sudden panic. "My bag," I gasped, pointing toward the empty chair. "Grace, she took my bag. The contract is in there, Dashiell. If she opens it, we're dead." Dashiell's face turned into a mask of cold stone. He didn't waste time asking questions. He scanned the room, his eyes sharp and predatory. "She's heading for the garden terrace. My mother is out there. Go, I'll cut her off through the library." I didn't wait. I kicked off my high-heeled shoes, ignored the shocked gasps of the socialites, and ran toward the glass doors. The cold night air hit my face as I sprinted across the stone patio. I saw the shimmer of Grace's white dress disappearing into the hedge maze at the edge of the estate. "Grace! Stop!" I screamed. I burst into the maze, my feet stinging against the gravel. I turned a corner and skidded to a halt. Grace was standing under a stone archway, my purse open in her hands. She held the folded white paper, our contract, and she was laughing. "You really thought you could play in our league, didn't you?" Grace sneered, waving the paper. "A signing bonus for your mother's surgery? A 3-month fake dating clause? Auntie Rosalind is gonna love this. You'll be in jail for fraud before the sun comes up." "Give it back," I pleaded, taking a step forward. "You've already stolen my designs, Grace. Isn't that enough?" "It's never enough for people like me," she snapped. She turned to run toward the far end of the garden where the elders were gathered, but she tripped over a loose root. The paper flew out of her hand, caught by a gust of wind. It sailed over a stone wall and landed near an old weathered wooden bench by a fountain I hadn't noticed before. I scrambled over the wall, ignoring the tear in my expensive silk dress. I dove for the paper, but as my fingers brushed the parchment, my eyes fell on the bench. Carved into the old wood were 2 names, faded by years of rain and sun. Briar plus Kit. I froze. The world seemed to go silent. Kit. Memories I had buried for 15 years came rushing back. I was 6 years old, sitting on a bench just like this one at a summer camp for kids with heart conditions. My mother had been a nurse there. I remembered a skinny, quiet boy with messy dark hair and eyes that looked too old for his face. He was the only one who didn't laugh when I cried because I missed my dad. He had shared his lunch with me and promised that one day he'd buy me all the stars in the sky so I'd never be in the dark again. I used to call him Kit. He was my first friend. My only friend. Then, his family moved away, and I never saw him again. Looking for this? A hand reached down and picked up the contract. I looked up. Dashiell was standing there, but he wasn't looking at the paper. He was looking at the carving on the bench. "You remembered," he whispered. I stood up slowly, my head spinning. "Kit? You're Kit?" Dashiell, no, Kit, looked at me with an expression of such raw vulnerability that it shattered the billionaire mask he wore. "I never forgot you, Briar. Why do you think I was really in that parking lot? I've been tracking your career for years. I knew you were at the Ray Group. I was coming to find you that night, but then you ran up to me with that $500 and I wanted to see if you'd recognize me." "You let me pay you?" I whispered, half laughing, half crying. "You let me think you were a driver?" "I wanted to be whoever you needed me to be," he said, stepping closer. "Just like when we were kids." "How touching," Grace's voice hissed from behind the wall. She had caught up, her face twisted with spite. "A childhood romance. It won't matter once the police see that contract. Give it to me, Dashiell, or I'll tell everyone you're just as much of a fraud as she is." Dashiell turned to her, his eyes turning back into ice. He didn't say a word. He slowly reached into his pocket, pulled out a lighter, and flicked it open. He held the flame to the corner of the contract. No, Grace shrieked. We watched as the paper curled and turned into black ash, floating away into the night air. There is no contract, Grace, Dashiell said calmly. There is only my word. And my word is that Briar Alden is the future of this company. If you say a single word about fake dating, I will release the full unedited video of you buying Briar sketches from Harlan. I won't just ruin your career, I'll make sure your father loses his entire estate in the lawsuits. Grace backed away, her mouth hanging open. She realized she had lost. Truly lost. She turned and fled into the darkness of the maze. I leaned against the stone fountain, my legs shaking. You burned it. The only thing protecting you from the board? You destroyed it for me. Dashiell walked over and took my hands in his. I don't need a piece of paper to tell me I want to be with you, Briar. I've been waiting 15 years to find you again. I'm not letting a lie get in the way of the truth anymore. He leaned down, and for the first time, the kiss wasn't for the cameras. It wasn't for Alaric or Rosalind or the press. It was for the kids on the bench. It tasted like sandalwood and old promises. But as he pulled away, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from the hospital. Urgent. Maris Alden's condition has stabilized, but we have a complication. A third party has blocked the insurance funds for the surgery. Please contact Dr. Rowan immediately. I looked at Dashiell, my heart sinking. Kit, my mom, someone stop the payment. Dashiell's jaw tightened. Tamsin, or Grace's father. They're hitting back where it hurts most. The fairy tale was over. The war had moved from the ballroom to the hospital. The text message on my phone felt like a drop of ice water sliding down my spine. I looked at the screen, then at Dashiell, the world around us blurring. The romantic glow of the garden, the childhood revelation, the kiss. It all vanished. My mother was dying in a hospital bed, and someone was playing God with her life. They blocked the funds, I whispered, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. Dashiell, the surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. If the hospital doesn't see the payment cleared by midnight, they'll lose the surgical slot. She won't survive another week of waiting. Dashiell's face went terrifyingly still. He took my phone, read the message, and immediately dialed a number. Callum? I want a trace on the insurance block for Maris Alden. Now. I don't care if you have to wake up the CEO of the insurance firm and find out where Alaric Ray is. He hung up and looked at me, his hands gripping my shoulders. I'm going to fix this, Briar, I promise, but you need to get to the office. The office? Why? Tamsin left the gala early, he said, his eyes darkening. I have security alerts on the Ray Group design vault. Someone just used your keycard to enter the high-security gemstone room. They aren't just trying to kill the funding. They're trying to frame you for theft to make sure no judge in the city will listen to your plea. My heart somersaulted in pure terror. If Tamsin stole a high-value stone using my ID, I'd be in a police station while my mother was in the ICU. Go, Dashiell commanded. My driver is out front. He'll get you there in 10 minutes. I'm heading to the hospital to handle the insurance board in person. No one touches your mother while I'm still breathing. The Ray Group building looked like a haunted tower in the middle of the night. Most of the floors were dark, but the top floor, where the design vault sat, was glowing with a faint, eerie blue light. I burst through the front doors, the security guard barely having time to look up as I sprinted for the elevators. My mind was a whirlwind. I thought about the fake boyfriend contract, the childhood bench, and Tamsin's smug, jealous face. She didn't just want my job. She wanted my soul. The elevator dinged at the top floor. I ran toward the vault, my bare feet slapping against the cold tile. The door was slightly ajar. Tamsin, I yelled, throwing the door open. Inside, the room was a mess. Display cases were shattered, and velvet trays were tossed across the floor. Tamsin was standing in the center of the chaos, holding a small velvet pouch. She looked up, her hair disheveled and her eyes wide with a frantic manic energy. You're too late, Briar, she hissed. I've already sent the photos to Alaric. The police are on their way. They'll find you here, surrounded by millions of dollars in stolen diamonds, with your keycard in the lock. And guess what? I've already told the hospital that the money for your mom's surgery came from a suspicious source. You're insane, I said, stepping toward her. You'd let a woman die just because you can't draw a decent necklace? I'm the lead designer, Tamsin screamed. I was supposed to be the star. Then you came along with your talent and your billionaire boyfriend. Well, let's see how much Mr. Jake loves you when you're behind bars for grand larceny. She lunged for the door, trying to push past me. We collided, and the velvet pouch fell to the floor, spilling a dozen raw diamonds across the tile. We scrambled for them, scratching and clawing like animals. Tamsin grabbed a heavy crystal paperweight from a nearby desk and swung it at my head. I ducked just in time, the glass shattering against the wall. You think you've won? I panted, pinning her arms against a display case. Dashiell knows. He knows everything. He has the security footage from the gala. He knows you sold my sketches to Grace. That footage doesn't matter if you're a thief. Tamsin laughed hysterically. Look at the cameras, Briar. I wore a wig and your coat. On the screen, you're the one who broke the glass. She was right. I looked up at the security camera in the corner. From that angle, with the lighting, she looked exactly like me. But then, the office lights flickered and died. In the sudden darkness, Tamsin gasped. What's happening? Put the lights on. A calm, deep voice echoed through the vault's intercom system. The lights are off because I've switched the system to thermal imaging, Tamsin, and thermal imaging doesn't care about wigs or coats. It sees the heat of the person. It sees your height, your gait, and the specific signature of your heart rate. It was Dashiell. And right now, his voice continued, cold and steady, the police aren't coming for Briar. They're downstairs, watching the live feed of you attacking her. I bought the Ray Group 10 minutes ago, Tamsin. You aren't standing in Alaric's office anymore. You're standing in mine. The lights slammed back on. Tamsin dropped the diamonds, her face turning a sickly shade of gray. She looked at the door, where 4 police officers were already standing with handcuffs ready. I sank to the floor, my lungs burning. I didn't even watch as they led Tamsin away. I just grabbed the office phone and dialed Hale's cell. Is she okay? I sobbed. The surgery? Is she okay? The block is gone, Briar, Dashiell said, and I could hear the relief in his own voice. I bought the insurance company too. The surgeons are scrubbing in. Your mom is going into the theater in 5 minutes. I let out a cry of pure, raw emotion. I was sitting on a floor covered in diamonds, but I felt like the richest person in the world because my mother was going to live. I'm coming to the hospital, I said. Wait, Dashiell said. There's one more thing. Alaric Ray didn't just try to block the funds. He was working with Grace's father to hide a massive embezzlement scheme. They used your mom's medical bills as a way to launder money, Briar. You weren't just a designer to them. You were their scapegoat from the very beginning. I looked around the room. The mirrors, the gold, the luxury, it was all built on lies. I'm done with this place, I said, my voice firm. I'm done with Ray Group. Good, Dashiell whispered, because I have a new company waiting for you. But first, get to the hospital. Your fake boyfriend has a real chair waiting for you in the waiting room. I stood up, wiped my face, and walked out of the vault. I didn't look back. I had a mother to save and a childhood friend to keep. But as I reached the elevator, I saw a final news alert on the lobby TV. Breaking. Ambrose Group files for bankruptcy. Grace Ambrose exposed in global design scandal. I smiled. The world was burning, but for the first time, I wasn't the one being consumed by the flames. The smell of the hospital was something I could never forget. Bleach, floor wax, and that heavy, silent tension that hangs in the air when life is balancing on a needle. I sat in the VIP waiting room, my midnight blue gala dress looking ridiculous against the plastic chairs and white walls. My feet were bare and bruised from running through the Ray Group vault, and my hair was a tangled mess. I didn't care. I just kept my eyes fixed on the double doors of the surgical wing. A shadow fell over me. I looked up and saw Dashiell. He had ditched his tuxedo jacket, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar and his sleeves rolled up. He looked exhausted, but the moment he saw me, he reached out and pulled me into his arms. I buried my face in his chest, and for the first time that night, I let myself cry. I cried for my mom, for the years of struggle, and for the little girl who had sat on that wooden bench 15 years ago. She's in good hands, Briar, he whispered, his hand stroking my hair. Dr. Rowan is the best in the world. He told me the prep went perfectly. You bought the insurance company, Dashiell? I asked, looking up at him with watery eyes. And the Ray Group? You're going to run out of things to buy if you keep trying to save me. He gave me a small, tired smile. I told you, I'm a businessman, and you are the best investment I've ever made. Besides, I liked the idea of firing Alaric Ray personally. I had Callum send him his termination papers via a singing telegram. I let out a shaky laugh. You didn't. I did. It was very high-pitched. We sat together in silence for 3 hours. Every time a nurse walked by, I jumped. Every time a machine beeped, I held my breath. Dashiell never let go of my hand. He told me stories about his life after he moved away, how his mother had pushed him to be a shark, and how he had spent his nights looking at the stars, wondering if the girl from the camp was looking at them too. But the peace was shattered when the elevator at the end of the hall opened. Rosalind Jake stepped out. She didn't look like the triumphant queen from the gala. She looked furious. She marched toward us, the click of her heels sounding like gunfire. Dashiell Jake, she hissed, ignoring me entirely. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've tanked the Ambrose merger. You've tied up millions in a failing jewelry firm like Ray Group. And the board is meeting right now to discuss your erratic behavior. They think this girl has cast a spell on you. Dashiell stood up, moving in front of me like a human shield. The board can meet all they want, Mother. I own 51% of the shares. If they don't like my behavior, they can resign. You are throwing away an empire for a nurse's daughter. Rosalind pointed a trembling finger at me. She's a fraud, Dashiell. She hired you. She tried to pay you $500. How can you trust someone who sees you as a transaction? She didn't see me as a transaction, Dashiell said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. She saw a man she thought she could trust, and she was right. You're the one who sees people as transactions, Mother. You wanted me to marry Grace because of her father's mines. You didn't care that she was stealing designs, or that she's a hollow shell of a human being. Grace is one of us, Rosalind screamed. No, Dashiell said. She's one of you. Briar is the only thing in my life that's actually real. Rosalind turned her venomous gaze on me. You think you've won? You think you'll just walk into this family? I will spend every cent I have making sure you are never accepted. I will tell the press everything. I will tell them your love story started with a bribe in a parking lot. I stood up then. I was tired, I was dirty, and my mother was behind those doors with her heart cut open. I didn't have any more room in my soul for fear. Go ahead, I said, stepping around Dashiell. Tell them. Tell them I was so desperate to save my mother's life that I took a chance on a stranger. Tell them that Dashiell was so impressed by my talent that he helped me expose a group of corporate criminals. People love a story like that, Mrs. Jake. It makes your son look like a hero, and me look like a survivor. But you'll just look like the woman who tried to stop a heart surgery. Rosalind recoiled as if I'd slapped her. She looked at Dashiell, looking for support, but he just crossed his arms and stared at her with those cold, silver eyes. Goodbye, Mother, Dashiell said. Callum will show you to your car. Don't come back to the hospital. Rosalind opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She turned on her heel and fled, her dignity finally shattered. The silence that followed was heavy. I collapsed back into the chair, my heart racing. She's never gonna stop, is she? She doesn't have a choice, Dashiell said, sitting beside me. I'm moving her to the estate in Italy. She needs a very long, very quiet vacation away from my business. Just then, the double doors of the surgical wing swung open. Dr. Rowan walked out, pulling off his surgical mask. He looked tired, but there was a smile on his face. Miss Alden? I stood up, my knees shaking. Is she okay? The surgery was a complete success, Dr. Rowan said. Her heart took to the repair perfectly. She's in recovery now. You can see her for a few minutes once she's settled, but she'll be sleeping for a while. I fell back into the seat, a sob of pure relief breaking out of me. Dashiell wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight as I cried. The weight that had been on my chest for 3 years, the fear, the debt, the secret, finally lifted. She's okay, I whispered into his shirt. She's really okay. She is, Dashiell said. Hours later I was allowed into the ICU. The room was dark, filled with a soft hum of monitors. My mom looked so small in the bed, but her skin didn't have that gray, sickly tint anymore. Her breathing was steady. I took her hand and kissed it, whispering thank you over and over. When I walked back out into the hall, Dashiell was waiting by the window, looking out at the city as the sun began to rise. The sky was turning a beautiful, soft pink, the color of a rare sapphire. "What happens now?" I asked, walking up to him. "The 3 months aren't up. We still have a fake relationship to maintain for the public." Dashiell turned to me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. "I'm tired of faking, Briar," he said. He didn't get down on one knee. He just held the box open. Inside was a ring, but not one of his. It was a ring I recognized. It was a simple silver band with a small, rough-cut opal. "My childhood ring," I whispered. "I lost this at the camp. I found it in the grass after you left," Dashiell said. "I've kept it for 15 years. I was going to give it back to you tonight, but then I realized I don't want to just give you your past. I want to give you a future." He took the ring out. "The board needs a CEO with a stable life. My mother needs to see that I can't be bought or bullied. And I need the girl who told me I was the man who would burn the world down for her." He looked at me, his eyes full of a truth that no contract could ever capture. "So, let's give them a real story, Briar. Will you stay? Not for the money, and not for the job, but for me?" I looked at the ring, then at the man I had hired in a parking lot. I thought about the journey from a cubicle at Ray Group to the penthouse of Jake Group. "On one condition," I said, a playful smile finally touching my lips. "Anything," he said. "You have to give me back my $500. I still have to pay for the bus ride home." Dashiell laughed, a real, booming laugh that echoed through the quiet hospital hall. He pulled me into a kiss as the sun finally broke over the horizon, lighting up the city in gold. The fake boyfriend was gone, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need a lie to be happy. The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum was filled with the scent of lilies and the hum of 1,000 voices. This was it, the finale of the Luminous Heart Design Contest. But tonight, it wasn't just about a trophy. It was a funeral for the old world and a coronation for the new. 3 weeks had passed since my mother's surgery. She was currently sitting in the front row, looking radiant in a peach-colored silk dress that Dashiell had insisted on buying her. Seeing her color back, seeing her eyes sparkle as she looked at the stage, was a victory greater than any gemstone. "You're shaking," a deep voice whispered behind me. I turned to find Dashiell. He looked lethal in a midnight black tuxedo, but his eyes were soft as they landed on me. I was wearing my final entry, the Eternal Secret Necklace. I had taken the Secret's Cage sketch from the gallery and brought it to life with the most exquisite black diamonds and a central, pulsing fire opal from Dashiell's private collection. "I'm not shaking," I lied, adjusting my silk gloves. "I'm just vibrating with energy." Dashiell smiled and took my hand, kissing my knuckles. "The industry is calling this the most anticipated reveal in a decade. The Ambrose family is gone. Alaric Ray is in a jail cell awaiting trial for embezzlement, and Tamsin is, well, let's just say she won't be designing anything but license plates for a long time." "It still feels like a dream," I admitted. "Sometimes I wake up and check my bank account to make sure I didn't imagine the last month." "Believe it," he said, with your back pulling me close. "Tonight, we tell the world that Jake Group isn't just buying companies. We're building them, starting with Alden and Jake." The lights dimmed, and the announcer stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you have been waiting for. The winner of the Luminous Heart Grand Prize, and the new creative director of the newly formed Alden Jake Luxury Division, Briar Alden." The roar of the crowd was deafening. I walked onto the stage, the eternal secret glowing against my skin. I didn't look at the cameras or the famous critics. I looked at my mom, who was crying tears of joy, and then I looked at Dashiell, who was standing in the wings with his arms crossed, looking at me like I was the only thing in the room. I took the microphone, my voice steady for the first time in my life. "For a long time, I thought I had to be someone else to succeed," I told the crowd. "I thought I had to hide my struggles and pretend my life was perfect. I even tried to hire a fake life because I was afraid the real one wasn't enough. But I learned that the most beautiful things in the world aren't the ones that are perfect. They're the ones that have been through the fire and came out stronger." I looked directly at the back of the room, where Grace Ambrose was standing near the exit, wearing a cheap trench coat and sunglasses, trying to witness her own defeat in secret. This design isn't just about jewelry, I continued. It's about the truth. And the truth is, you can't steal talent, and you can't buy a soul. Thank you. The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. Later that night, after the champagne had been toasted and the contracts had been signed, Dashiell and I escaped to the rooftop of the museum. The city of New York stretched out below us, a carpet of twinkling lights. So, Dashiell said, leaning against the stone railing, CEO of her own division, how does it feel, Miss Alden? It feels like I owe a certain driver a lot of back pay, I teased, leaning into his side. Dashiell reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled envelope. He handed it to me. I opened it and burst out laughing. Inside was $500. 5 crisp $100 bills. I can't take this back, I said. It's technically a bribe. Think of it as a return on investment, he said, turning me to face him. You gave me that money when I was a man who had everything but nothing to live for. You gave me a reason to play a part, and then you gave me a reason to be myself. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a second ring. This wasn't the silver band from our childhood. This was a masterpiece. A band of intertwined rose gold and platinum, holding a diamond that looked like it had been carved from a star. The childhood ring was for the girl I lost, he whispered. This one is for the woman I found. Briar, I'm done with the fake boyfriend title. I want the real one, for the rest of our lives. I didn't even let him finish. I threw my arms around his neck and kissed him, the city lights blurring into a haze of gold around us. Yes, I breathed against his lips, 1,000 times, yes. We stood there for a long time, watching the sun begin to peak over the flat horizon of the city. We had started with a lie in a parking lot, fueled by desperation and a handful of cash. We had faced corporate sharks, jealous rivals, and a mother who valued power over love. But as the light hit the ring on my finger, I realized that the best designs aren't made of gold or stones. They're made of the people who stand by you when the world is burning. I was no longer the girl hiring a fake boyfriend to save her job. I was the woman who had saved herself, and in the process, I had found the only thing that was never for sale. A love that was real. Come on, Dashiell said, taking my hand and leading me toward the stairs. We have a company to run. And a wedding to plan, I added, glancing back at the sunrise. Just promise me one thing, Dashiell said with a mischievous glint in his eyes. What? No rented guests. I want to know everyone there is actually happy for us. I laughed, the sound echoing into the crisp morning air. Deal, Kit. Total honesty from here on out. I can live with that, he said. And as we walked down together, I knew that for the first time in my life, I didn't have to look back. My mother was safe, my career was mine, and the man holding my hand was exactly who he was supposed to be. The fake boyfriend was gone. The real Dashiell Jake was mine. And our story was only just beginning.